Hey, I'm Brandon with Hoyack, and today I'm going to do a Whiteboard Wednesday session. I've been talking about a few topics that I think are interesting to me, and over the last few different sessions, a lot of them have been very focused on AI and stuff like that. I'm going to do one a little differently today. Today, I'm going to do a session on something that I sort of came up with on a whiteboard pre kind of AI when I first started trying to build a software development team. Not really first starting, actually, this was well into my journey of building a software development team. So currently I have a small team of software developers. I've hired over 100 developers in the course of, the last, 5-6 years of working on different projects. But when I initially started doing dev stuff, a lot of pride in my ability to accurately estimate jobs. And so I found that I would commonly be able to go into a situation and flat rate price it. Something I used to always do with computer network, systems infrastructure upgrades kind of things. And a lot of times I would say, well, if you know what you're doing, you should be able to estimate this stuff out pretty accurately because it's always the same kind of stuff you're going to encounter. You're going to encounter the same types of problems. You should just be able to estimate your way through that. And I had a pretty good mentality for how to estimate, like if I needed to do a server upgrade, if I needed to upgrade an email system or upgrade a database server, swing some hardware, put in all new desktop PCs, all new workstations and network, and rerun the network cabling for a business and everything. I could quote that out. But when I started to do the software development stuff, it was a little different. I found it to be a lot harder to actually build the whole thing out, especially in time frames that I might have suggested I could do it in. Because a lot of times I was thinking only about this idea. Here's the idea, okay? This is a light bulb, all right, shining an idea. And then the result, the ending result, and I would think very linearly, okay, I'm going to take this idea and get to this result. How do I get there? And so I was like, well, I'm going to write the code. I'm going to build the code, and that's going to get me the result. So I just need to build the code and I get the result. And I just need to hire a programmer, a dev who's going to write the code. And they need to be a full stack dev because they're going to have to deal with the major components like the front end, the back end, and the database. And they're going to do that. And so these best case scenarios would come out where it's okay, and we're going to have these features and they're all going to get implemented by this time. And so that was really interesting because you would start to put this together. You'd be like, okay, yeah, well, I can implement a version of most of these features within this time, but it's only going to be this V0 version that's not ready for production. And so a lot of times people are thinking, I want my idea in production. I want my idea fully tested. I want my idea to support both the end users that are going to use it and the business that's going to also be supporting it. And I want my idea to be delivered right the first time and on time. Meanwhile, the amount of planning that sometimes goes on up here is very, very low. And sometimes the amount of management that's in here is very wide and very thin. And so we end up with these situations where the dev is getting squeezed between lack of requirement, building of requirements, and this kind of very broad sort of thin management that's coming across them where they have to accomplish all of these goals for all of these things, but nobody's really managing each of these individual things or how they're getting done. This one person ends up kind of being in the middle of it all. And usually the coder is not happy, okay? This creates a very unhappy coder a lot of times. They're being pulled there, they're getting squeezed here, there's not a whole lot of substance there. They're having to do all these things and they're having to fit within this box that it probably had a budget around here and the need around here. And that's a very normal thing where it's like, okay, yeah, what ends up happening is that you get like this delivered for what you had budgeted all of that for. And then a lot of times they're going after the coder saying, well, they didn't do their job. Or in some cases, the company that provided the coder and provided this whole entire plan to begin with. And so this is a very normal sort of scenario that, you have your idea and this outcome and these steps that you're going to try to go through. And it just creates all of these problems that just don't end up being organized very well to get the outcome you want, especially not in the budget that you're looking for, which a lot of times you shouldn't have even started the project because you needed this budget, but you couldn't figure out you needed this budget because you didn't do enough planning. Okay, so I would always tell people all the time, I would say, we need to do planning. We need to spend time planning. And a lot of times I would even say the plan is going to be a percentage of this entire thing. So if this is the whole project, then 10% of this needs to be the planning, at least, preferably even 20% of it. And the thing is, this whole entire timeline here is going to be somewhere in excess of 1,000 hours usually. And so that means that you need at least 100 hours of planning. And that's not just the lowest end time you can possibly find either. It's not just like, well, let's get the cheapest planning people we can. It's usually a mixture of experts, and it's usually a high rate, 200 an hour, stuff like that. Okay, so just 100 hours at 200 an hour is going to be like $20,000 for planning. A lot of times the budget is like 50, 75K. Maybe somebody's generously got a budget of 100K, but they're not willing to spend enough on the planning. So that's where we get into this thing where we have to be able to put in the amount of time on the planning up front to be able to figure out how much this is going to take. Now, of course, I have a methodology that I use to organize all of this stuff. Okay, and it's my methodology I came up with myself, so I'm going to present it out here. And you can take it or leave it, but it's the way that I work. Now, I'm probably going to be evolving this methodology in the modern AI agent age because things are a little different now. Things have been, they're evolving very quickly. This was a model that I was using like 2 years ago, and now it's like almost obsoleted. However, it's still going to be, it's a classic model that's going to be around for a long time. Okay, so doesn't go away. The structure is the structure, and you'll see why the structure I'm using it's robust. Erase all this. We'll move on to what I call the SaaS Ziggurat. All right, the SaaS Ziggurat. So here's the SaaS Ziggurat concept. This all starts with, of course, your brilliant idea, and your idea is this shining light bulb. And what we have up here is the top of the food chain of this whole project. Now, underneath this idea, you're going to have layers underneath it. And so one of the layers that you have underneath it is the planning layer. Now, I described the planning layer in a bit of detail earlier, and so you're going to have that. Now, there's different parts of this. There's like the business planning layer, there's the functional requirements, there's the non-functional requirements. There's a bunch of different things for basically doing the planning. And then there is the creative layer. On the planning layer, you're usually going to have a consultant connected to that. There might be a mixture of experts, typically, and they're going to be working with the idea owner. So we're going to put the idea owner right there. All right. And now, so these two people are working there. And then generally you're going to have some creative stuff. So you're going to usually have somebody that you've got to have on the X side of things. Okay. So there's like UX, and then there's also the different assets, the assets that you've got to build and different things like that. So you may, again, have a few different people involved in the creative aspect, right? Somebody that's maybe like laying out the user journey, and that's kind of planning the front end, what the front end of this thing is going to look like. So right underneath that, you're going to end up with this project management layer. Okay, so there's the PM layer, and that's where you're going to end up with generally your project manager. It may be this person here might kind of also fill that seat. Okay, this is where things are going to kind of diverge a little bit, because now you've got this plan, and so now you need to build a front end. That's where you get a front-end developer. Now, you would get a specialized front-end developer here, not a general full-stack developer. This person's whole entire job would just be to receive the plans from the creative. The creative is creating the user experience and the assets, the Figmas. Usually you have a Figma expert in here. And so you've got like business people up here, and they're talking to the creatives down here and the project management. And they're all kind of working in one big block. And then you start to get into this line where you go, okay, so now we have this front end developer. And then a little further down, and I'm going to show you the in between, is the back end developer. Okay. Now the back end developer and the front end developer are usually two different people. And they're two different types of mentalities. Whenever I hire for a front end developer, a lot of times I'll ask a question. Any developer, I'll ask a question. What subject did you excel at the most at school? Was it maths, or was it like reading and writing? Was it arts? Was it sciences? What did you excel at? And typically the people that are more mathematical or oriented are going to go into the back end category. Maybe sciences and maths are going to end up in back end. And the people that are more creative oriented, that are more of the arts and more of the liberal arts and things like that, are going to be front end. They're going to be better a lot of times for front end, because they're going to have like an interest in what's happening at the creative level as well, usually, and they're going to be able to tie back to that real well, but they're not like as analytical as the back end person is going to do a better job at building the analytical structures and thinking about these things that just take a little different mentality there. In between these two layers, in between these two builders, is the full stack. And so I'll add a full stack right in between these two, okay? And so why will I do that? Well, the full stack is there only for one purpose. It's there to integrate, okay, what the front end and the back end dev are doing. All right, so the full stack developer is the integrator. They take the development of the front end job and then they integrate it with the development from the back end. So the back end's creating these like swaggers and these APIs, and they're like, here's our Postman collection to the APIs that we've stood up for you. And then the front end engineer is receiving Figmas from the creatives and API swaggers from the back end dev and trying to integrate that. And so what we do is, instead of having the front end developer, is usually a lesser experienced dev that's typically like, there's some bad to the bone front end developers, okay, that are just like the best of the best front end developers. But there's a lot more front end developers than back end developers. And there's a lot more entry level front end developers than there are. There's a lot of them. And so a lot of times you'll end up with like an entry-level front-end developer, more senior level like back-end developer. But what I do is I don't even care. I just get the best of both worlds. And instead of having a front-end person working on troubleshooting why different APIs aren't working and as the integration is going on, I want the front-end developer to just be able to focus on the front end. I want the creatives to be able to do their thing, working with the business people on getting that stuff figured out so that all that stuff is the best of the best. The front-end developer can focus on that. That's their whole job. They don't have to focus on all the integration stuff. And then have a full stack developer that understands the front end and the back end do the actual wiring together, okay? Doing the integration, all right? And so what's really important there is that gives me the ability for them, usually like a good all around, not even necessarily most seasoned, but you could hire like a really good seasoned full stack developer, or just like a jack of all trades full stack developer. You say, okay, you're a full stack developer and your whole job is to take APIs we're going to give you, and then you're going to take front end code that we're going to also give you, all built, and I need you to wire the front end to the back end API. So it ends up being a kind of a front end heavy job, because there shouldn't be too much on the back end that dev has to do, but there might be things where that dev says, hey, this front end needs to be able to do this. Back end isn't sending that. I need that. And it may be able to go and help the back end developer get the thing they need added to the schema, the serializer, or whatever it is that's getting that API over to them, or handling that information the way they need it handled. So this person here is usually senior level. This person might be kind of senior level. This person could be the most senior level, and then usually that's like at the more junior level, okay? And then the PM is a different characteristic and stuff. And then finally, down at the bottom, we kind of have this bottom layer. And this bottom layer essentially is the database. So the database is and it could be managed by like a DBA. A lot of times it's co-managed by the back-end person, but oftentimes you may have like a database administrator on a team. Okay, so this right here is what it takes. This right here is the mixture of experts that it takes to build what I call, this is going to build actually the user-facing line of your app. So this is the user-facing line. This is the line of the app that the people that use the app face. What you would think of when you build an app. But what's often missed, actually I'll get to that in a minute. So just to build an app, okay, just to make a real good solid app, you need a team of 7 people here so far. And these people have to be a mixture of different experts. All right, this isn't one dev that's pushing on this. If you start to try to put this into 1 or 2 people, it gets very difficult. And now you want to launch this thing, right? And you want to do it quickly because, see, a lot of times you need to have the ability to distribute features down to the team, and then you need the ability for the back-end devs to be working on you have different back-end devs working on different back-end tasks. You need different front-end devs working on different front-end tasks. And integration devs that are integrating and testing and all of this stuff. Because this could have to do with like quality checking, QCing, stuff like that. Sometimes you also have a QC engineer in the mix here, okay? But this is still a lot of different people that it takes to build an app. Now, what about the other line? What's over here? Well, guess what? It's the same thing. So we have front end, we have the full stack, we have the back end, okay? And we have the front end engineer, another one, and the integrator and the back end, okay? And so why do we have this other line of people? What is this other line of people doing? And maybe we have another person down here that's also doing databasey stuff, okay? This is gonna be the business-facing side. So the business-facing side is all the admin tools, all the things that the people that work for the person with the idea typically, that they're going to use to manage the users that are using that app. This gets missed all the time. People just forget about it. They don't even think about it. They don't consider, they don't contemplate this. And so this expands the scope a lot, okay? Now, when you get into all of this, then you need a few other things, all right? So the front end is usually talking to a repo, okay? So there's a front end repo, all right? And then this is also pinging a repo, all right? And then the back end is pinging, this guy here is typically also pinging another repo, a back end repo. So there's like the front end repos and back end repos. And so in here, you've got CI/CD going on. Okay, so you've got these CI/CD layers that you've got to have. And so that's going to be your DevOps, right? So now you typically have these DevOps that are required in some capacity. Okay, this is another resource. And then underneath this, like way underneath here, you have you've got your cyber ops. So you've got DevOps and SysOps and cyber ops. Like, we could, I'm not going to put systems operations and cyber operations because that's usually already all encompassing up there. But just to run the app, just to manage, just to do the app, okay? you've got to have, like I just pointed out, like 14 resources, another 2 resources. So it's like, you're looking at potentially, this is a way to have, 16 resources all working together, okay, on your project. And what are they doing? They're doing continuous integration and continuous development, okay? CI/CD is typically what it is. And this is not something that you just you do this iteratively. You have things where you're constantly iterating through your idea, okay? You're like, okay, we got this idea, we're going to put this out, we're going to try this, we're going to try that. Now, this doesn't even touch the legal and the marketing stuff that you also need all around this and to expand it. So that is why a lot of the app projects, they have a hard time getting off the ground, is because they start out with this and they may end up with one of these resources, and sometimes 2, and they don't get very far with that. Okay, so it's like one person trying to build like the pyramid, and you need more. You have to have this team of people, and then ultimately, you have these people pushing on building features. You have these people planning and devising features, and these people building them, these people managing the rollout of the features. And then you've got like the support teams that are handling, basically handling on, every side, from the business side to the customers, handling customer support that also wraps around this stuff. So that's this is the SaaS Ziggurat, and this is why dev teams, are teams, and this is a mixture of experts, sort of organized way of thinking about how you go about putting together a software development project. So thanks for listening. I hope this answers some questions about like how you would think through building out this stuff and doing this stuff and wiring these processes together. This is the process that I use when I talk about a project with somebody. Typically, I'm like talking kind of about this type of model and sort of like, okay, because I provide this is sort of the model that I actually provide. It's a very mature sort of, it's for bigger projects. It's not for like that little idea. It's for like the big ideas, okay? Because that's usually like big ideas. They take big teams. All right? They don't always. It's not always true. But for the most part, if you want it done, you want it done right, you want it done in a way that, it's not about doing it right the first time. It's about iteratively learning and then keeping on going. And so, that's why this isn't a one and done type shot team. This is basically a team that sticks. This is a sticky team. This is a continuous investment, okay? This continuous integration, continuous development thing, it's a continuous investment, because once you build this, then you have to keep it up to date. You have to have all of these people in places to be able to keep it moving and keep it up to date. And yeah, so that's why it gets complicated. You need somebody that understands how to run this layer, 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 how to run all these different layers. You need somebody that can work with this and work with this and be able to handle the people up there too and the people down here. And so that's where, it's a very different sort of, there's a very broad sort of complex mixed MOE going on here. So hopefully that kind of helps. And if you have any questions about how to implement this in your organization, I'd be curious to learn how it's being implemented now, and what kind of challenges that you would foresee to implement this type of a configuration. So I'm Brandon, and this has been Whiteboard Wednesday.